When you first met your spouse, you probably felt that rush, right? The butterflies, the spark, the I can't stop thinking about you feeling, the let's fall asleep on the phone and listen to each other breathe feeling. Do people even still do that? Y'all know it's been like 800 years since I first fell in love, so I might be a little bit out of touch. But here's my question. Were those feelings love or were they just chemistry? And if the chemistry fades, does that mean that the connection is gone too? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. I want to help you to see why chemistry and intimacy are not the same thing, and how to know which one your marriage is running on, and how to build both, because you need them working together if you want a relationship that is both exciting and connected. I remember working with a couple, let's call them Larry and Lisa. And during their premarital counseling that I walked them through, their attraction was electric. I mean, I could feel it through the computer screen. They sat really close together, they giggled at nothing, and they were just so cute. But fast forward 3 years, just 3 years, and while the spark was still there in certain moments, they ended up reaching out to me again. But this time they reached out for marriage coaching because they could not have a deep conversation without having an argument. Maybe you know exactly what that's like. On the flip side, I've also seen couples who seem to be best friends, who knew each other inside and out, but hadn't flirted in years, and most of their sex lives had stalled. Which one is better? The chemistry that the first couple had, or intimacy like the latter couples? Well, neither on its own. That's where we have to start by defining our terms. Because if we're not even talking about the same thing, we certainly cannot think that we're going to grow in the right direction. So let's talk about it. What is chemistry? I want you to think of chemistry as that instant spark. It's the physical attraction, the quick heartbeat, the butterflies. It's thrilling like fireworks. And like fireworks, it can be dazzling in the moment and then fade quickly if you don't add fuel to the fire. Now, contrast that with intimacy. Intimacy is the slow burn. It's emotional closeness. It's the safety to be your full self without fear. It's not just about sex. It's about being truly seen and still being truly loved. And here's the thing. A healthy marriage needs both the fireworks and the slow burn. Which brings me to a model that I use to help couples to see where they are and where they want to go. I'm so excited about this framework, you guys. Once you learn this, you're going to be teaching this to all your friends and family. You just watch. If you use this framework, be sure to give credit to where credit is due, okay? I don't want to see this floating around on Instagram now without my name attributed to the bottom. I'm being real. All right, so this thing that I'm going to introduce to you is called the intimacy framework, okay? The intimacy framework. So I'm going to walk you through these 4 quadrants. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see these 4 quadrants. And if you're listening on the podcast, you're just going to have to listen and visualize what I'm saying. Okay. Now, let me just pause right here and say that you're not going to have to remember all of this because I love you so much. I am including a free resource in this whole intimacy series. And each episode is going to have either a free assessment, a guide, a resource, a quiz, something that you can do at the end of every episode. You can get that at danashay.com/intimacy series. That's DANACHE.com/intimacy series. Totally free, just from my heart to yours. All right, so let's get into these quadrants, okay? The first quadrant is high chemistry, high intimacy, okay? So think high chemistry plus high intimacy. This is the marriage sweet spot, all right? This is where you feel passionate and secure. Now, the next quadrant is high chemistry, low intimacy. Okay, this is where your marriage is fun but fragile. I mean, chemistry is like through the roof. I want you to think back to like Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. We saw what happened with that marriage, right? Because they had high chemistry, but apparently low intimacy. Okay. The third quadrant is low chemistry, high intimacy. Now, this is like the couple that I mentioned to you before in premarital. These couples are stable, but they are in danger of developing the roommate syndrome. All right. So let me back that up. This is basically those couples that I was talking about that they, get along, right? It seems like they're best friends, but they've lost their spark, right? This is the low chemistry and the high intimacy. So you don't want to get here. This is roommate central. All right. And we don't want to be there. Okay. Now, if you're low on both, then my friend, you are running on empty. Okay. You don't want to be low chemistry and low intimacy. So, once you realize, and I want you to think about this, and once you see where you are, then you can figure out your next step. That is where the real work and the real fun begins. This does not have to be laborious, like hard work, you guys. This is supposed to be fun. You are learning how to grow in your intimacy. Okay, so I'm going to give you some practical steps to build both chemistry and intimacy. Okay, because remember, the goal is not either or, the goal is both. All right, so let's first start with chemistry. Not the subject that you learned in high school, all right, but real chemistry. Okay. So for chemistry, I want you to remember the way that you used to flirt before you were married. Or if you're not married, think about when you first got together. Bring that back. Stay curious about each other. Surprise each other. Try something new together. Novelty goes a long way to wake up attraction. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Can you wake up attraction or chemistry once it's dead? Now for intimacy. I want you to make space for deep, judgment free talks. I know it's easier said than done, right? Listen, this is why I'm doing this intimacy series, because I want to help you learn how to be deep. It's just every man's dream, right? I know, I know. But after this series, you're going to love being deep. You're going to love the intimacy that you've developed in your relationship as well. So, the way to build intimacy is not only sharing your dreams, but it's also learning how to share your fears. And I'm going to tell you guys something. I don't know that I've ever mentioned this on a podcast episode, and we're over 350 episodes in. I opened up to Sean about being a victim of sexual molestation when I was a kid. That is not an easy thing to share. It's certainly not easy for me to be saying it right now on the podcast, but I've talked about this in smaller groups where I speak. I've talked about it from stages. And I hadn't really told Sean. I had maybe alluded to some things, but something happened in our family, and I was forced to tell him, not forced, that's kind of strong. I was led to tell him this very traumatic thing that happened to me as a child after 16 years of marriage, you all. You would think, I mean, we've known each other since we were 5 years old and 8 years old. We've known everything about each other, so we thought. But Sean did not know that I had suffered this as a child. And this is what I'm talking about with real intimacy. You're not just sharing your highlights, you're not just sharing your dreams and your hopes and your aspirations. You're also sharing your weaknesses, you're sharing your fears, you're sharing these traumatic moments that have happened to you in your life. And listen, I know that it is hard. Trust me, I know that it is hard. You see, intimacy is giving each other the gift of feeling understood. When I shared that with Sean, of course, he didn't judge me or reject me or push me aside. We grew deeper in our intimacy. So, what might you need to open up to your spouse about that you've never shared? Are you willing to be vulnerable, or are you afraid that your secrets can't be trusted? That's how you know if your marriage is really intimate or not. I don't care what your Instagram reels look like. I don't care what your Instagram posts. I don't care what you say about each other on your anniversary. You will know if your marriage is truly intimate by what you're willing to share. Okay. So we're trying to build both here. And I want you to watch out for the traps that couples often fall into when they're trying to build intimacy and when they're trying to build chemistry. Because if you do this the wrong way, your marriage can actually backfire. Okay. So we've got to be aware of some of these common pitfalls and some of these myths about chemistry and intimacy. And I'm going to share some of those right now. All right. Myth number one: if you have chemistry, intimacy will follow automatically. Not true, my friends. One does not beget the other. Okay. Myth number two is once chemistry fades, it's gone forever. This is also not true. Chemistry has resurrection power. Just because you've lost it, just because it's faded, just because you haven't tongue kissed in 3 years, does not mean that you cannot get that back. Just because you've forgotten how to flirt, just because you've lost your game, does not mean that you cannot get that back. That's a myth. All right. Myth number three is that intimacy is just about sex. Oh, my friends, we are going to talk about this so much in this series. Not true, Fred. Okay, I won't get all deep into that right now because we have several episodes that are going to debunk that. But for now, just know when I say intimacy, I do not mean sex. Okay, so how do you actually put this into action starting today? Well, I have a challenge for you. All right. I want to give you a challenge because I don't want you to just listen to this episode and get inspired or listen to this episode and be like, we don't have no chemistry. We don't have no intimacy and give you more fodder for like why you and your spouse should separate. All right. That's not the goal. If you're there, then please, that's not the goal. All right. So here's the challenge. This week, I want you and your spouse to rate each other on your chemistry and intimacy levels on a scale from 1 to 5. All right. So one is going to be intimacy is basically non-existent in our relationship. Okay. And then 5 is we're knocking it out of the park. We are doing this dang on intimacy thing. Okay. And then I want you to do the same thing with chemistry. After you're done rating yourself, then I want you to have some deep, honest, and grace filled conversations. And I want you to talk about how you can grow in both arenas. Okay. Now, if you rate a 5 in both areas, then I need to invite you onto the podcast to be a guest so that you can teach the rest of us. Okay. You may realize that you are stronger in one area than another. That is totally fine. That is normal. And it's actually your roadmap to creating a more fulfilling and a more intimate relationship. So, this is why being honest is going to be really important here because if you're 5 and 5, then you really don't need this episode and you really don't need to grow in intimacy. But you're probably going to have some areas that you need to grow in. All right, my friends. Well, as we wrap up this episode, it was pretty short today. As we wrap up today, I want you to remember this. Chemistry draws you together while intimacy keeps you together. You see, a great marriage isn't choosing one over the other. It's learning how to nurture both. And you learn how to nurture both by doing, okay? So to help you, I want you to remember that cheat sheet that I told you about, okay? It's my free chemistry versus intimacy self-check, all right? That's the free resource for today's episode, all right? Remember, every episode in the series, I'm giving you a free resource. So you can get that today at danashay.com/intimacy series. That's DANACHE.com/intimacy series. And friend, if this episode resonated, I want you to share this with a friend or a family member who needs it. Y'all know Uncle Sam and Aunt Tanya who have like the worst marriage in the world. Don't just talk about them at the family reunion. Share this episode so that they can grow in their relationship. And then I want you to make sure that you're subscribed to this podcast because next week we are going to be talking about major intimacy killers. You are not going to want to miss that one. So until next time, remember that I am here to help you to build or rebuild a marriage worth celebrating. You can do this. Let's have fun with this. Let's create marriages that are long, that are lasting, that build a legacy for our kids, kids, and for everybody else who's watching our marriages. Thanks so much for listening. I love you all. Make sure you get your free resource at danashay.com/intimacy series. And I will see you on the next episode. Take care.